Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. This is a special episode. It is entitled Cottage Talk Opinion, which is my opinion. What should Fulham do about the João Palhinha situation the rest of the season? It's an interesting one. He signs a new contract, and first thought is nothing. He should be a Fulham player the rest of the season, but I think it's more complicated than that. And I will be getting into that in the next 15 to 20 minutes. I look forward to sharing my thoughts on his situation and what I believe Fulham should do. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. I also want to mention thank you very much for all the downloads of the show. The last two shows, the post-match shows, were just an incredible amount of downloads. I just want to thank my co-hosts because I know that has a lot to do with it because they were fantastic. I know people like to listen to me, but they also want to listen to Giannis and Max, and they were fantastic. So a shout out to both of them. They're going to be back often on the show as well, and I'll have other co-hosts to join me as well. But I just want to give them a special shout out because the numbers for the post-match show were fantastic, and I know they have a lot to do with it. Most importantly, it's what they offer to Cottage Talk, and I'm one that really knows what they offer, and it's a tremendous amount. Their opinions are valuable to me, and they share it on the show, and I think everyone likes to hear what other supporters have to share besides myself, so I'm glad that the three of us got back together to do what I thought was a great episode of Cottage Talk. If you haven't listened yet, please do check that out because myself and the guys, I think we really put on a great show for you, so please do check that out. Okay, so let's get to talking about João Palhinha. Let's start here. I have to start with what I would call the fallout from the contract extension. Now, the news of the contract extension had some very interesting response into it. Amongst the Fulham supporters, you can imagine it was this great euphoria that he had signed a contract extension for another season. The question is, what was behind it? And I've actually done an episode all about that, but I want to focus on the fallout because does this change everything with Fulham this season? Well, I'm going to be getting to that, but what's interesting about this, if you go on social media, you're going to see a lot of responses. You're going to see many articles written about this that are non-Fulham related, meaning coming from Germany, coming from the national press, and the speculation people are out there talking about how Bayern Munich plans to come back in. There have been all these comments in January. They're still going to come back. It doesn't change anything. You're going to hear that. You're going to read that. That's great. That's fine. I've also seen speculation that Manchester United might be interested. That's great. No problem with any of that. That's fine. But that should not change how Fulham deal with the João Palhinha situation, in my opinion. And that's what I'm going to go through in this show. Bayern Munich might want him, but ultimately the decision comes down to Fulham Football Club if they want to sell him. So I'm going to share my thoughts on what I think they should do moving forward. But before we do that, I want to share some more information that I find interesting, and I'm going to share now for the first time. So after the Man City match, I actually was told some information from a source, and I'm just going to share a little bit about it because I think it gives background to potentially what happened in the João Palhinha situation. Now, this source told me that Fulham were trying to tentatively accommodate João Palhinha in wanting to go to Bayern Munich, but they were not going to sell him unless they found a replacement. That all played out, and I actually believe all this to be true. So I wanted to share this information from this source that I believe is extremely credible, and I believe that Fulham were not going to obviously sell him without finding a replacement. I was also told by this source that they tried to find a replacement. I believe all this to be true. So you can believe what you want. I believe the source that told me all this information. I was also told by the same source that Marco seems to be happy with the players that he has at the striker position. So again, you can look at it for what it's worth there too. But, that the manager was not basically pushing the issue for a new striker. So that's interesting as well. So you can make all of that what you want. I believe all the information I'm sharing with you is true. I disagree with a need for striker. I absolutely feel that. But again, my source was adamant that Marco believes in the strikers he has. So again, I just want to share that information with you. Give a little backdrop to what happened at the end of the window. I truly believe this information to be true that I'm sharing with you now. I learned all this information basically right after the Man City match. So keep that in mind. Okay. So what should Fulham do in January? Let's get to talking about that. So in my opinion, Fulham should not be selling João Palhinha in January at all. That's the way I'm looking at it. He signed a contract extension. But again, that gives them more leverage on how much money they can get. It makes it more difficult for a team to sign him. It's done all that, but it doesn't stop teams from being interested, for putting in bids, for João to go to management and say, listen, I still want to move to Bayern Munich. None of that changes. It doesn't. But what Fulham should do, this is just my opinion, is they should not be selling this player in January. We've seen the impact that he has. And for me, you take that player out, you are a different team, and you open yourself up for a relegation battle, which none of us want. None of us want that. So the only way I would consider this, and I've thrown this out there, I don't see this happening if Fulham are in a relegation battle when we get to January. It makes no sense to do this, even if they get a replacement. I don't see that. I also don't see it if they're fighting for Europe. Now, that's my dream. It's going to be a difficult one to come true, but you never know. But if they're fighting for Europe, again, why would you sell João Palhinha at that point? The only way I could see Fulham selling, or that they should be entertaining this, would be if they're comfortably mid-table, they're nowhere near those 3 relegation spots, and the player is pushing for it big time. And you get the right fee, and you get a suitable replacement. All of that would have to happen, in my opinion, for me to say, okay, it's okay. I don't think Fulham should be selling him in January. I think that they should be looking towards the summer and basically preparing for the future. And that's going to lead me to talk about this. Fulham should wait until the season is over. This is what they should be looking for. And what I'm thinking about here is, if you look at it in the summer, and I'm not one that is a big proponent of comparing Fulham to Brighton. I don't want Fulham to be Brighton. I know everyone looks at Brighton as the model way to do it. I don't like the fact that they sell all their best players. I don't like that. I absolutely don't like that. Sometimes you're forced to do that. In this case, Fulham were probably forced to sell Mitro, and at some point they're going to be forced to sell João Palhinha. So what do? In this case, you do follow, in my opinion, what Brighton has done. You find a replacement. But this is what I do. Going back to January. In January, instead of finding a replacement for the here and now, you find them for the future, meaning you find a young defensive midfielder that you are going to have in place in January that can work with the club, that can work with Palhinha, to be ready to replace Palhinha in the summer. Now, Fulham have been linked to a few defensive midfielders, young defensive midfielders, and I would be all for them trying to bring in one of those players in January. That makes sense to me, because then you have a replacement that you can actually have in place. It's already played within Marco's system, and then he's ready to go in the summertime, then you can sell João Palhinha to the highest bidder. That's what I would do. That's absolutely what I would do, because I don't think João Palhinha is going to be with Fulham beyond the end of the season. Don't see it this summer. So you have to plan. So you start planning in January. You don't do this over the summer. You don't do this in January. The only caveat, like I mentioned, is if for some reason they decide they are comfortably mid-table, there's no threat of relegation, and everything aligns, potentially. I still wouldn't do it, but that's a situation that you would have to look at. I would wait until the summer, but January is very important because I think you would bring in a player, pay a good amount of money for that player, because there's some young defensive midfielders that's going to cost you some money. Pay the money because you know you're going to get the money from Palhinha, and then you look towards the summer. And I'm going to say this right now. Because of the contract situation, because they added another year, I would totally get as much money as you can. If they were looking, I'm talking about Bayern Munich, for 55, 60 million pounds, I don't care about his age. We've seen his value. He's going to continue to show it. It doubles. It absolutely doubles. You're talking 100 million pounds. That's my starting. That's where I start. And you can throw the age at me, but if you look at the player, the age should go out the window. You know what he brings. You know he changes the game. He changes everything for a club the minute he goes in. He fits into any club, being that tackling machine. He is an extremely valuable and rare player. And if you want him, you're going to have to pay at the top of the market for him. And hopefully there'll be more than a few teams that are coming in for him. I love João Palhinha. I understand that he wants to leave. But if I'm Fulham, I wait until the summer. But I plan in January. Get that player in. Have him play for the rest of the season so he can slot in and be ready to go for next season. That's the way I would do it. That makes football sense and business sense. That's what I would do. But this João Palhinha situation is complicated. But what's great about it, he's back with Fulham Football Club. And Fulham, again, hold most of the cards here. The player obviously can voice his opinion, but ultimately the club makes that decision. And they've given themselves more leverage with this contract. So for me, there is an advantage here to Fulham. Other teams can want him. I see all of the talk in Germany, and I'm just going to say I laugh at it because you are just so disappointed. All the Bayern Munich supporters just so disappointed, so entitled that they did not get this player. Like Fulham did something wrong here. No, they actually did all the right things here. So I'm just going to mention that. Okay, coming up next to end the show, I'm going to share my thoughts on what's been going on with Jay Stansfield at Birmingham City. Okay, to end this episode of Cottage Talk, I just want to share my thoughts on what's been going on with Jay Stansfield and why I think this has been a great situation for him. Birmingham City are going places. I truly believe they will contend to come back to the Premier League. I think they potentially could win automatic promotion, or they'll be in the playoff. I truly believe that. They've built a team. There's a lot of talent on that team, and adding Jay to the mix of Birmingham City really makes sense for them. And obviously right now he's playing really well. He's already scored 3 goals in 4 games. That's a pretty good number. And I think Jay Stansfield's going to thrive at Birmingham City this season. I think it's good for him, but what's great is that this season could benefit not just himself, but also Fulham Football Club for next season. Because I think a year in the championship, if he continues to score goals and continue to be an influence for Birmingham City, can only help next season in the Premier League. Fulham right now have an interesting situation with 3 strikers. They do. But what's interesting, they have one that they could potentially bring back. That's one of their own. And they could really, hopefully, slot him in next season. Hopefully, he would be ready. So I'll be continuing to follow the progress of Jay Stansfield. But right now, it's been fantastic. So big shout out to him for everything that he's doing. I hope all the Fulham supporters are following his season. I really do. And not that I'm a Birmingham City supporter, but I will be watching them the rest of the season. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Cottage Talk. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. My name is Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.